in terms of your successes in creating true entrepreneurship, especially in rural areas in South Africa, which is the mantra of SEDA, how have you fared?
We do have small enterprise development support all across the country. If you're specifically looking at the rural development side of efforts last year, we have had close to 44 cooperatives supported last year, and a number of initiatives that has been extremely successful, where we even launched this community and public-private partnership cooperatives initiative a couple of months back. That was in near Kokstad, and there are quite a number of examples what I can give out.
I think SMEs have gotten a lot of attention recently, because certainly in this economy they are seen as the drivers for growth and job creation. And in other countries within the OECD, for instance, small enterprises account for over 70% of employment, even in richer economies. So keeping them afloat, getting them to work properly becomes a real priority. But many are saying in a country like South Africa, access to funding is a huge problem. Keeping a business going, longevity, is a real challenge.
From SEDA's side, like SEDA is actually a non-financial support agency. However, we do provide information and guidance with respect to how do you manage your finance, cash flow, etc. With respect to the specific question what you said, there has been a very recent Finmark study which actually identified cash flow as one of the critical issues when we speak about access to finance. Access to finance, it is a problem for most startup companies within South African context, and it is a little bit better when it gets to the growth stage of the small enterprise, but it is still a challenge within South African context.
All right, so you don't provide financing per se, but what sort of support do you provide?
We do, like I mentioned earlier, it is non-financial support. Let's say, like, it doesn't matter which part of that life cycle you come from in an entrepreneurial journey, whether you have a simple idea or you have a running enterprise. You could actually walk into any one of the SEDA branches. Somebody will sit down with you and put you through a couple of diagnostics, depending upon the stage in which you are. And based on the diagnostics, we would actually suggest certain, I wouldn't say remedial action, I would say some growth strategies for you, some guidance with respect to how best to grow your company, or how best to establish a company, or even right at the beginning of the thing, whether it is a viable idea to look at.
I mean, I think also beyond financing, other real challenges are skills and technology. We know about the skills deficit in South Africa. I mean, we speak about it ad nauseum on this program, but the burden for the small enterprise is, instead of focusing on marketing and operational functions, they end up having to train people, which is an additional cost to running the business.
It's true, but then we shouldn't actually forget the predominant sector within South Africa. When we speak about small enterprises, they're more or less hands-on enterprises. Many cases, owner-managed small enterprises. That actually brings in an additional element, like when you're training the owner, training the SMME, you're actually increasing the skills as well. But I hear you, like there is a challenge. The moment you move further up, the question of affordability comes in, the question of getting the right skills base comes in. Speaking about the technology specifically, we do have one of our programs, SEDA Technology Program. What it does is, like, we do take SMMEs which are technology intensive onto an incubation program, and we actually allow them to grow to the expansion stage. And we also do have a couple of additional support mechanisms from the technology side, like in terms of acquisition of technology, whether it is training or the actual machinery equipment to enhance the productivity, we do that.
Okay, Kwibi wants to ask.
I mean, I suppose one of the questions that come to mind, Ranjit, is how is small enterprise, how is it aligned with government objective? Because obviously to make small enterprise work well within an emerging market such as South Africa, one of the things that you have to have working is government objectives and making sure that government is looking after it. And with that in mind, there's a whole bunch of fiscal spending happening as far as government is concerned. How are small enterprises fitting into that? And how is that promoted in order to make sure that this fiscal infrastructure is actually being run properly down the line?
Kobe, I need to actually take it back to the origins and the reasons for such an agency. By 94-95 period, when we first started with the white paper in itself, we have accepted the fact that there is a market failure within this specific domain. And these agencies were created to actually address such market failures. We could sit here and debate whether the market failures have been addressed totally and should such interventions are not needed anymore or not. That actually forced most of the agencies which are created to be brought in line with the government policies. CEDA in itself has actually gone through such a change process from the original INSEEC Enterprise Promotion Agency and NAMAC Trust. 2004 amendment was actually targeted at creating a national footprint. It doesn't matter where in South Africa you are, you could actually walk into a CEDA office and you get the same service. Just getting back to your latter part of the question where you're talking about how do you actually link it up with the fiscal spending, that takes a little bit more longer term planning. You know, what we have been doing insofar quite successfully, particularly at the local levels, is we have been managing to link up with local spending and trying to link it up with that. Where the problem we have had is in the larger fiscal spending or major events that is happening within the country. It's the link up has been rather peripheral, I must say.
Just retaining this conversation about what happens at the macro level and the implications. I mean, obviously, if you're a business in South Africa, you've got to subscribe to South African laws. And we all know that currently there's been a lot of debate about the inception of the Companies Act and the governance codes that will now be statutory. Again, small enterprises are complaining, you know, that, for instance, when it comes to regulations and demands on shareholder structure and various codes of conduct, a different system of application needs to apply when you're dealing with small businesses versus big corporates, because you're not dealing with the same turnover, etc., etc. What sort of technical support is being offered in that regard?
We do offer support in terms of the actual company's registration itself, whether it is a CC at this stage or a cooperative. We do provide some guidance and take them through the process. In terms of the Companies Act itself, that is something which is getting debated quite heavily. And the regulatory environment in South Africa is one of the most constraining ones. You know, all of us have recognized that. And wherever possible, it is actually getting debated and trying to be reduced. What is the minimum constraints, what we can actually apply to have a seamless set of operations.
All right, part of your key objectives going forward is to strengthen partnerships with local government. Now, there are CEDA agencies all across the country, but what is the relationship you have with the local authorities, with the provincial government, and also with the expectations of the national government?
CEDA, like I mentioned, it is actually created by an act of parliament, and we are a national agency. We do have 9 provincial offices, which works extremely closely with the provincial growth plans and the provincial structures. At a local level, it is further enhanced by the fact that we can't be present every way. So recently what we have done is we have actually been in discussions with the various district municipalities, and we do have co-location facilities. That's over and above the 42 branches and the 50-odd information centers we have.
Okay, going forward then, the most vulnerable, people would argue, are women and the youth. Youth unemployment is on the rise in this country, and we also know about women almost being some sort of an underclass and yet being the backbone of the economy, because in the informal sector they provide the majority of entrepreneurial opportunities, and in the formal sector they are about 40% of economically active South Africans. So the support that women need, do you look at them as a separate category, women and the youth?
No, we do have certain initiatives targeted specifically at those groups, but what I want to mention is when I look at the last few years' profile of our clients, it matches the South African profile perfectly in terms of the youth and women-owned enterprises. Right at the beginning of this conversation, we actually had, I mentioned the cooperatives initiative. Majority of the cooperatives are owned, run, and benefited by women entrepreneurs in this country. So there is a dominance there.